Have you ever been judged for simply existing? What if a racist passenger tried to force you out of your seat just because of your skin color? And what if, in a twist of fate, it was your father who held the power to turn the tables? Watch as a young black girl stands up against prejudice and the shocking moment when her FBI father steps in. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more real stories. Flight 289 Chicago to Tokyo boarding gate C12. The soft hum of overhead bins closing was briefly interrupted by the sharp click of high heels. Linda Harrington stepped into the first-class cabin like she owned the air around her. At 45, with perfectly layered blonde hair and a Chanel scarf knotted just so, she carried herself like someone used to getting exactly what she wanted, without having to ask twice. Her designer tote brushed against a seated passenger's shoulder, but she didn't apologize. Her narrowed eyes scanned the rows until they landed on 2A, the coveted window seat. And on the girl sitting in it. "You've got to be kidding me," Linda muttered under her breath, her face already tightening with disapproval. She marched toward the row and came to a full stop, blocking the aisle. "Excuse me, young lady, I believe you're in the wrong seat." The girl looked up, startled but composed. 16-year-old Amira Johnson sat upright, her posture precise, her dark curls pulled back into a neat bun. She wore soft gray joggers and a navy hoodie with Lincoln Honors Academy stitched above her heart. "I'm in 2A, Amira said calmly, holding up her boarding pass. Linda didn't even glance at the slip of paper before waving it off like a fly. "I always book a window seat. You must be mistaken. This is mine." Amira glanced back at her pass. "It says 2A. "Oh, for heaven's sake." Linda snatched the boarding pass from Amira's fingers, squinting at it before shoving it back. "Unbelievable." She turned sharply to the flight attendant near the front of the cabin. "We have a situation. This child is in my seat. I want her moved. Now." The murmurs began, phones stilled mid-scroll. Some passengers looked away. Others looked directly at the scene, then quickly looked down. Amira's fingers curled tightly around her armrest, her lips pressed into a thin, controlled line. She had faced this before, not always this loud, but always this clear. "I'm not moving," she said quietly. "This is my assigned seat." Linda's voice climbed 2 octaves. "You think you can sit here because you say you belong? Please, you don't even look like you're supposed to be in first class." Silence fell like glass breaking. The flight attendant's smile faltered. No one said a word. But Amira knew every pair of eyes was watching. Derek Johnson moved through the security corridor with a purposeful stride, his badge clipped inside his suit jacket, visible only to those who needed to see it. At 48, he carried the quiet strength of a man used to navigating war rooms and global crisis maps, but still unsure how to navigate the growing distance with his teenage daughter. Behind the soundproof doors of the secure briefing room, maps of East Asia flickered on digital displays. Intelligence chatter was up again. Derek listened, contributed, signed off on protocol, but half his mind wasn't there. It was back on the tarmac in seat 2B beside the girl he was trying to know again. Amira. 16. Smart beyond her years, controlled, independent, not cold but careful. She'd become that way slowly, one missed birthday at a time, one "I'll call you tonight" that turned into next week. Derek knew what those silences cost. This trip was supposed to be a reset. 2 weeks, no interruptions, no phones, no agents knocking at the hotel room door, just him and his daughter. He had said it aloud, looked her in the eye. 2 full weeks, Amira. No phone, no distractions, just us. And for the first time in years, she'd smiled in a way that wasn't guarded. He'd seen that smile fade when he got the text from Homeland moments before boarding. 10 minutes, he had said, already walking away. He hadn't seen her face after that. Now, sitting in front of a glowing Intel screen, Derek's hand hovered over his phone. His thumb rested on the lock screen. No alerts. No missed calls. He allowed himself to hope, for once, that the world might hold still long enough for him to be present. But just 3 gates away, that hope was already unraveling. Amira remembered the moment in 3rd grade like a film loop she couldn't erase. She just aced the entry test for the gifted program, one of only 3 students in her school. Her backpack was twice her size and her smile even bigger, until the teacher pulled her aside and said, with a soft, practiced tone, "Are you sure this is the right group for you, sweetheart?" No one else had been asked that. The unspoken message came wrapped in polite concern. It was never about her grades. It was about her hair, her skin, her presence. Amira didn't cry that day. She went home, did 3 chapters ahead, and aced every unit, but she remembered. It wasn't the last time. At 12, she and her father had visited a department store after one of his rare weekends off. She wandered toward the book section. Minutes later, she came back pale, eyes rimmed in red. Derek had found her tucked into the back seat of their SUV, arms folded, lips trembling. "Security followed me," she whispered. He didn't press for details. He didn't need to. He knew that look. He'd worn it himself once. He went back inside, didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten lawsuits. He just asked the man at the register one quiet question. Why only her? The answer didn't matter. The truth had already shown itself. Since then, Amira learned not to flinch, not to react. Instead, she let her achievement speak. Captain of the debate team, fluent in Japanese, National Honor Society, volunteer work. Still, the questions lingered in stares, in double checks, in soft assumptions. She built armor, not from anger but from knowing. Today, sitting in 2A, she wore that armor, not flashy, not hard, but enough to keep her dignity intact. Even if no one in that cabin dared to speak for her, she'd learned how to stand for herself. Linda's patience had worn thin, the anger bubbling beneath her polished exterior. She stood towering over Amira, her fingers tapping angrily against the armrest. "I know what I saw," she spat, eyes narrowing with calculated venom. "You're lying. You don't belong here. You forged that ticket." Amira said nothing. Her posture remained steady, her gaze fixed on the window, her expression as unreadable as ever. But inside, the fire began to burn brighter. The silent battle was nothing new. She had been taught to never shrink from these moments, never let their words make you smaller. Linda's voice grew sharper. "You think you can fool everyone because you're sitting here in a nice seat. Look at you. You don't belong in first class." She jabbed a finger toward Amira, as if trying to force her into an explanation that would never come. Amira's hand tightened around the armrest, but she didn't move. She was done speaking. Her silence was her shield now. Linda huffed, her eyes darting toward the flight attendant. Madison, who had been standing nearby, caught between professional duty and the chaos unfolding. "Get her out of my seat," Linda demanded, her voice now rising, drawing the attention of several passengers. "This is my seat and I'm not going to sit next to her. It's—" "Please," Madison said, trying to maintain her calm. "I'll need to check both tickets first, ma'am." "Check them," Linda barked. "But I guarantee she's lying. You think she's some honored guest because she's in a suit. You think that gives her a seat in first class." Amira's hand remained clenched on her phone, her mind running through 1,000 responses she would never speak aloud. She glanced at her father's seat, hoping for an answer, any sign that he would appear and make the world stop turning just long enough for her to breathe. And then, in the space between breaths, the world shifted. The cabin door at the front of the plane opened with a quiet click, and all at once, Derek Johnson stepped through the threshold. His eyes scanned the cabin, pausing only when they met Linda's face. He walked in, unfazed, as though he were entering a room full of important meetings, not a battle of wills. His steps were slow but purposeful. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The weight of his presence, silent, authoritative, spoke louder than any shout could. Behind him, almost unnoticed, 4 people stood. No one else seemed to blink, but the shift was unmistakable. Their uniforms gave them away, though they didn't move. Amira's heart stilled. She couldn't look away, but this time it wasn't out of fear. It was because her father had returned, and he was here now. The hum of the cabin went silent as Derek Johnson approached the scene. His every step was deliberate, the soft sound of polished shoes on the carpeted floor the only noise in the room. He moved with the kind of quiet authority that made even the seasoned flight attendants hold their breath. Amira's gaze never left him, her heart steady, but a quiet thrill ran through her veins. He had promised, and now he was here, exactly as she'd hoped, exactly when she needed him. Linda, standing at the center of the confrontation, faltered. Her mouth opened, then closed. She had been so sure of herself, so confident in her ability to manipulate the situation with her loud voice and expensive name. Derek stopped just in front of her, towering with a quiet intensity. He looked at her without judgment, but there was no mistaking the shift in the air. The room held its collective breath. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. With a smooth motion, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his military credentials, flashing them briefly for Linda to see. The sleek metal badge reflected the cabin lights, but the message it carried was unmistakable. "Your husband reports to me," Derek said calmly, his voice low but strong. The words landed like a well-timed blow. Linda's face drained of color as the implications of his words slowly sank in. Her fingers trembled, her grip on her bag tightening, but she remained speechless, unable to find the words to defend herself. The room seemed to hold its breath, watching, waiting for the next move. Derek didn't move, didn't raise his voice. He simply stood, silent, powerful, and unwavering. And in that moment, everything changed. As the plane hummed along, cutting through the sky toward Tokyo, Derek slid into the seat beside Amira. The tension in the cabin had evaporated, leaving behind a charged silence that felt oddly comforting. Amira hadn't said a word since the confrontation. She stared out the window, her expression unreadable. Derek watched her for a moment, wondering if she was still holding her emotions inside as she had learned to do over the years. He had always been there, physically at least. But his absence from her life, from the moments that mattered, had been as loud as the confrontation that had just unfolded. For all his titles, his authority, his ability to command rooms, he had failed to command the one thing that mattered most, the time and attention of the girl sitting next to him. The girl who had never asked for his power, she had only wanted him. He cleared his throat, his voice soft. "Amira." She didn't look at him, but he could feel the weight of her silence pressing between them. "You've been strong for so long," he continued, searching for the right words. "Too strong, I think." Amira turned toward him slowly, her eyes tired but sharp. "I don't know how not to be," she said quietly. "You've always been busy. I couldn't wait for you to be there." She paused, her voice faltering only slightly. "I got used to it." Derek felt a pang deep in his chest. He had known. Of course he had known. But hearing it from her, hearing the loneliness in her voice was different. It hit harder. "I'm sorry, Amira. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me," he said, his voice thick with regret. "I've missed too much, and I can never take that back. I wanted you to know I see you. I see everything you've done, everything you've had to carry." She swallowed, her eyes glistening but resolute. "I've been okay," she said, the corners of her lips turning up slightly. "I've learned to be." Derek reached out, placing his hand gently on hers, squeezing it. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't just her protector. He wasn't the man who fixed things. He was just her father. And that, finally, was enough. Amira squeezed back, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. By the time the plane touched down in Tokyo, the storm had already begun. Within hours, Flight 289 became a trending topic online. Videos of the confrontation were shared across social media platforms, each clip showing Linda Harrington's escalating tantrum and Amira's dignified silence. The footage spread like wildfire, drawing the kind of attention no one expected, and certainly not Linda. The backlash was swift and brutal. News outlets picked up the story, dissecting every moment with meticulous detail. Linda's name became synonymous with bigotry, and the hashtag Justice for Amira trended worldwide. Linda's husband, federal judge Richard Harrington, was forced to issue a public apology. His statement was filled with the typical corporate language, expressing regret for the incident and promising internal reviews, but it did little to calm the storm. Behind the screens, the damage to their reputation was already done. Amira barely glanced at her phone. The notifications were overwhelming, the comments endless. She didn't need to read them to know what they said. Instead, she kept her eyes trained on the horizon as the taxi drove them through the bustling streets of Tokyo. The emotional exhaustion from the flight still clung to her, but the silence between her and Derek felt different now, easier somehow. When they checked into their hotel, a young flight attendant approached her with a shy smile. "Amira," she said softly, "I just wanted to say thank you for what you did today." Her voice trembled slightly, as if the weight of the words meant more than she could express. "You gave me hope." Amira blinked, unsure how to respond. She didn't know what to say to that, hope from someone else, for something so simple as standing tall. Later that night, as Amira settled into her room, flipping through a book she had picked up earlier at the airport, a small folded note fell out. She opened it slowly, her fingers tracing the simple words written in a careful hand. "Thank you for standing tall. You inspire me." It was unsigned, but the message was clear. And as Amira closed the book and set it on the nightstand, she felt something shift inside her. It wasn't just the apology from her father. It wasn't just the justice she had witnessed. It was the realization that standing up, even in silence, had the power to echo beyond the moment. The sun dipped low behind the towering trees of Meiji Shrine, casting long shadows across the stone path. Tokyo's hustle was far behind them, and the serene, quiet atmosphere of the shrine seemed to erase the weight of the world, if only for a moment. Derek and Amira walked side by side, their steps in sync, the silence between them now comfortable instead of strained. No phones, no urgent calls from security briefings, no deadlines looming. For the first time in a long time, it was just them. No titles, no responsibilities, just father and daughter. Amira stopped at the edge of the small pond, the water reflecting the cherry blossoms that hung overhead in delicate pink clusters. She took a deep breath, feeling the calmness of the place settle inside her. The chaotic energy of the flight, the confrontation, the aftermath, everything that had consumed her was fading, replaced by something soft and steady. She glanced at her father, his strong figure silhouetted against the setting sun. For the first time, she felt like he was truly there, not as an authority figure or a protector, but as the father she had always needed. "I don't need a hero, Dad," Amira said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of everything she hadn't said before. "Just you." Derek turned toward her, his expression unreadable for a moment before his lips curled into a soft smile. There was a tenderness in his eyes that made Amira's heart settle. He reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder, his touch warm and grounding. "This time, I'm not leaving," he said, his voice steady and full of quiet promise. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. The faint rustle of cherry blossom petals in the breeze, the distant hum of the city, all faded away. It was just them, Two people who had spent years apart, now finding each other again. They sat under the blooming cherry blossoms, the petals drifting down around them like soft snowflakes. The sky stretched above them, infinite and unhurried, and for the first time in a long while, Amira felt the weight of the world lift. In that moment, there was peace. There was family. And for the first time in a long time, there was hope.